Hello there, it's Tom and Magnolia here, and this is Gunnerkrigg Court Chapter 58, A Big Day.
Hello there.
And straight away, Coyote lets us know that it actually is a big day because Annie's going to take Snuffle into the court to see her friend. And just a quick aside, on this page, we catch a glimpse of Sareed, who's one of the characters from the side story Annie in the Forest Part 1 and 2, which can be read in the extra comics section of the website. So there's not too much to say about the beginning here, but this chapter does contain some important information that will come up shortly.
So these guys, these contamination guys, they didn't do that stuff for Coyote and Asango, did they? These are new for Annie's new initiative?
That's right, yeah, because this is kind of a new event that's not really ever happened before, where they're bringing somebody in from the forest as a visitor, because they've not really had a liaison with the forest in the way that Annie is at this point. But I did make sure to not mention whether the people in the suits were humans or robots, so...
Oh, I didn't even think of that. But they do have kind of mixed square and round robot mold, don't they?
Yep, that's right, and I didn't really want to say either way what they were. So the whole time I wanted Snuffle to seem extremely underwhelmed with the grandeur of the court, just because it's so completely alien and different, and kind of crummy compared to her home forest. But as they're heading off to the class, we catch up from Andrew, hearing about Parley being away on training, and we get the indication that she'll be joining the rest of the characters later on in this chapter.
This is kind of interesting because I can't remember another time where Smitty had kind of described the limitations of his abilities, and it's cool to, see that he's thought about it and experimented maybe.
Yeah, he just casually mentions what would be the limits of his powers, and since it's something that he's kind of lived with his whole life, he treats his abilities pretty casually, and I didn't want to write him as a character that we would see grappling with these powers that he has. He's just come to accept them and live with them as part of his regular life.
I love Bugsy. I think she's just great.
Bugsy's really fun, and all of the fairy characters really are a departure from the rest of the cast.
Well, I love all the little details like that Bugsy thinks that people calling her Miss Bugsy is them getting her name wrong, and it's just, I love all the name stuff with them.
Yeah, any sort of modifier to a name that they've been given is, in their mind, giving them a completely different name. So we see Snuffle's rabbit friend again, and he seems to be doing okay. And he's extremely excited to introduce his friend from the forest to his new group of friends, the rest of the class that he is now in. And this class is, I guess, the year below Red and Blue's class. And getting to play around with characters like these is fun. Like I was saying before, it's very different from the rest of the story. But I am conscious to not spend too long with characters like this or have them in every single chapter, because I wouldn't want their shtick to get old to the readers. But when I do bring them in, it is always enjoyable to have these crazy characters doing weird things. And for this whole next scene, I get to draw them all floating around in the ether and doing weird things.
So Smitty has no real connection to the ether, does he?
No, not at all. But since Annie has been able to refocus a little and get back into doing things like this, she is able to concentrate and join in with these guys.
And this is the first time we've seen an actual fairy in the ether, not just a person who was once a fairy, so she looks pretty different.
Yeah, that's right. She looks super crazy. So in the ether, she's not really a creature that's constrained in the same way that the humans are. And we see also that the fairies are able to manipulate a lot of things. They actively change the environment that they're in to make it more comfortable. And we see also that Annie is beginning to see things that she couldn't before, such as these strings that are coming from Andrew, which kind of hint at his powers. And not even Bugsy, the other fairies, are able to see them. And this is a direct result of her being able to focus differently now that she doesn't have her blinker stone anymore.
Well, when I reread this chapter, getting ready to do the video, I noticed that later on Annie does explicitly say that it's because she's able to focus more, and I'm glad there was a reason for her to be able to see it besides just that she's the main character and she's special,
Yeah, I tried to make sure that there was a device in there that allowed me to introduce this aspect. But we get a small presentation from the rabbit, given for the benefit of Snuffle, explaining about what he and his friends do in the court and how he came to be and what they get up to day by day.
Did you mean for this to be a little bit creepy, kind of?
Sure, yeah, definitely. I've made no bones about the fact that these children are basically put to work by the court, analysing or interpreting some sort of data which is intentionally vague. And really, I kind of wanted these guys to seem almost the opposite of the robots. The robots talked about how they are happy to do work for the humans at no cost to their own bodies. But these children are kind of doing the work of computers at no cost to their own mental faculties. They're able to crunch these numbers and live in the court and work every single day. And they're perfectly happy to do it.
Well, I remember people being a little concerned about this idea, like the children being put to work like that. But if you could, to me, it's almost like a little bit of wishful thinking. I wish I could just have my body work while my brain was doing other stuff. And if you could have fun and do that kind of thing without and still be able to get work done, why wouldn't you, you know?
Well, yeah, the fact is that it's not really work to them. It's something that they can do in the background. And since we saw that even Snuffle herself was able to, with the slightest amount of thought, she was able to figure out the Rubik's Cube. These kids are more than happy to crunch the numbers that the court gives to them while they mess around in the ether and goof off. But they also are aware that they are working towards a goal, even if they're kind of menial rewards that the court is giving them for all the work that they're doing.
I like this page a lot, and it made me think a little bit about, like, he's basically, like, this person is basically saying that Bugsy isn't qualified to do much except be a teacher, but of course, for a normal person being a teacher, you would need to be qualified in a certain way, so it does seem like being a teacher for the fairies just means kind of keeping an eye on them and making sure they're just sitting there, you know?
Yeah, we've already seen that Bugsy's role as a teacher doesn't really involve very much. I mean, she was literally sleeping in her mind when we last saw her teaching a class. And I guess Bugsy's role is more as a role model for the kids, because they do really like her. They love the fact that she has her own clothes and a name, and they do all look up to her, even if they're all super familiar with her, and they would insult her just like they insult each other. But that's just part of how they are together, and really Bugsy is just a big kid. And this whole scene was just a chance for me to draw the kids floating around and draw a bunch of pages that aren't in a regular panel framework, which kind of like the ether pages I really love doing. And the whole time we're getting a little bit more information about the fairies. And outside of the ether, we see that Bugsy kind of explains her case and the case for the kids, showing that they really don't mind doing all this extra stuff.
Well, I was glad you included this scene because it shows that it's not that they're not aware that what they do and what they value is different from what humans value. It's not like they're being tricked somehow. Like, they know what they're doing and they know what they're getting.
Yeah, and I think if they were really unhappy, their personalities would allow them to show it very easily. But Bugsy points out that compared to a life in the forest, what they have here in the court is, for them at least, pretty fulfilling. And with the presentation over, the gang heads off to meet up with Parley, who's just come back to the court.
Now, I just want to say that I always think Eglamour is a pretty attractive character, but this is the hottest Eglamour, I think.
Well, I wanted it to seem like the two of them have just come back from a big journey somewhere.
Well, Parley looks cool too. I like her hair a bit messy like that.
I also wanted to show that Eglamour knew exactly how to treat a fairy from the forest, because he is very experienced in his role, and he's dealt with this sort of thing before. And once he leaves, we get to catch up with Parley and what they've been up to.
I do remember that the part where they're doing that arm grab, I asked you if that was a reference to something, and you just laughed at me.
And then we get the official introduction of Buff Parley, because she's gone through some changes now that will help her really accomplish the role that she's been given.
When this scene happened, it's when I really realized what Parley taking on Eglamour's role meant, which is that now she'll be able to do all the cool stuff Eglamour can do, and I got really excited thinking about that.
You know, we get some indications as to the stuff that she's learned, which also fills us in a bit as to what Eglamour would have gone through in the past in his role as the Dragon Slayer, and kind of what his duties in his role entail.
I like that little Smitty face looking at her new tattoos. I think he's into it. So, are all fairies vegetarian then, or do they even need to eat like humans do, or...?
Yeah, the fairies that live in the forest are vegetarian, but none of the former fairies or animals in the court are vegetarian. They just eat whatever. And while the gang's eating, we hear a bit more about what Parley got up to. And Annie's super interested in hearing what Eglamour has to say about Tony, because at this point Eglamour would have heard that Tony has come back to the court, but he's not really caught up on the whole situation.
I just wanted to ask really quick, now that Parley's all buff, do you ever miss drawing her like she used to be, or is it pretty natural? Like, you were planning it for a while, weren't you?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy drawing Parley as a bit buffer, because her build isn't super different from a lot of the characters' builds. And I kind of like drawing Parley as an attractive young woman with a very chiseled physique.
Yeah, well, she looks pretty cool.
And since this is only really the beginning of drawing her like this, I didn't get much opportunity yet, but I did try to look at the differences between male and female bodybuilders, and keep that in mind when I was drawing her.
One thing I really like about Eglamour, and with a lot of the adults in the story, but with Eglamour specifically, is that sometimes we'll catch a glimpse of his life outside of how he interacts with Annie or Kat, and we can see that he has his own stuff kind of going on, and I always like catching a glimpse of his personality when he's not being a teacher or role model or authority figure. But were you worried at all about the swearing, or... because I think it works really well.
No, I thought the swearing was really funny, and really the reason why I would censor it in this way is because it's much funnier to have it censored and imagine what he might be saying.
Well, this scene is what I think of when people seem to think that the story is too forgiving of Tony, when Eglamour is, to me, like a very sympathetic, likable character, and he's really laying into Tony here. He's not saying, like, well, Tony's bad, but he is brilliant, you know? He's really doesn't like him, and we're not supposed to think Eglamour's a jerk, you know?
Yeah, he's just giving his side of it, and Parley is conveying that to Annie. And really, none of what she's saying that Eglamour has said is that surprising to Annie, really. She's probably all her life heard people talking about her dad this way, so it's not really anything new. And she even suggests that maybe Eglamour has to get over himself. And once they finish lunch, they head out for a little tour of the court for the fairies' benefit. And after that, their little day trip comes to an end.
Does the court have sports at all?
Sure, for people who want to play sports, yeah.
They've got everything.
That kind of is the feeling that I want to give, that whatever you might think of the court probably has it. They certainly have somewhere that manufactures giant foam fingers. And as they head back across the bridge, we see that the friendship that Snuffle and the rabbit have is not really weakened in any way. They're still really close to each other.
Would Snuffle ever consider becoming a human?
No, it's not anything that she would want or consider. So I wanted to show that aside from missing her friend, she's doing all right. And they don't even stand on ceremony when they're saying goodbye. They just wave at each other, and the rabbit guy just starts heading back. Oh, and just as I'm recording this video, I noticed here on this last page, I completely forgot to colour the side of the ravine here. And I guess since these chapters have already been published, that mistake is also in the books. So,
well, I didn't.
On me.
I think it looks fine, like it's disappearing into fog or something.
Yeah, we'll just say that is what I intended. And disregard what I've just said in the video. And so the gang looks over the edge and they decide that it's time to get to work. And this bonus page is just a chance for me to draw a bunch of jerks.
Do you have a favourite of these randos?
Yeah, probably the girl with her eyes covered.
Yeah, she's cute. I like the hippie one also.
Excellent. And that is the end of that chapter. Come back again for chapter 59, Jean.
Bye!